And I've always wanted to be an artist, and I've always wanted to study art, and I've always had an interest in design and architecture as well. I think that my art process has developed primarily from my interest in how a material can tell a story and how that story can relate to our contemporary reality. As I've grown, using textile has been something very close to me because I think of textile as the primary architecture. It's this thing that covers our body. A lot of my research focuses on migration, specifically because of my familial history. My mother is from the Seychelles and my father is Kenyan but of Indian ancestry. Originally his family is from North India, Gujarat, and were moved to Kenya in the 1890s actually, and our family has been here ever since. My name is Tahir Karmali. I am a visual artist. I'm based in Brooklyn but born and raised in Nairobi. I think a lot of my experience at Kuona has lent to who I am today. I've worked with Dennis Muraguri, Tony Mugo, Meshach Oiro, and I've done a lot of shows that have always been in collaboration with other artists. The biggest contribution that Kuona has had on me is that kind of familial relationship that you can develop with artists and a rapport with artists, and not to think about each other as sort of competitors, but more as companions and people trying to create and build a narrative around art in Kenya. I chose the United States because of how malleable the master's programs can be and the amount of people that I could actually learn from within this particular university setting, instead of being relegated to only concentrating on like the MFA program or specifically painting or specifically sculpture. And like my personality is that of wanting to learn a lot of different things and trying to combine the narrative from these materials. One of my biggest influences on my work and how I think about investigation of craft has been Eva Hesse. That's definitely the 70s, late 70s. And also the writings of like Lucy Lepard in terms of like, really thinking about our relationship to art making and the landscape. I've always enjoyed reading Robert Smithson and Robert Smithson's work, specifically site and non-site, in thinking about our relationship to the built environment and the gallery space and the sort of landscape and the exterior space, and how we marry these two and how we think these relationships are and how these materials exist. Zarina Hashmi is one of my utmost favorite artists, and you will see a lot of references from her work in my work, especially when you see how things are hung and you see how things are put together, and the fact that a lot of her work was to do with migration and dual identity and all of these similar themes that I'm talking about. And then you will see, references to Ellen Atsui in my work, but like not references in a way that I think people traditionally think of Ellen Atsui's work, but specifically looking at how conscious Ellen Atsui is about his material choices. I'm back here now actually working on my first solo exhibition in Nairobi after almost 10 years, which I'm really excited to do. My work is very process driven, and I do concentrate a lot on material. And so sometimes you'll see the material coming first, and then sometimes you'll see the narrative coming first. So for me, this particular series that I'm working on now, the material came to me first. I had a desire to want to work with silk because of how silk is made. I was very interested in this idea of metamorphosis and silk as a sort of the cocoon for a silkworm to become the moth, right? And I was interested in that in terms of how we think about spaces, how we think about home, how we think about unraveling, and how people's homes, because of the environment and because of political political issues and border issues and so on, like multitude of issues with regards to this, how homes are being unraveled for the purpose and use for somebody else. For this exhibition, I am collaborating with a few people, of which is Amidoshi Shah, who I've known for a very long time. She is an artist and jeweler and designer based out of Nairobi. She is the person responsible for making quite a lot of the armature and the things that is holding and constricting the silk. So she's almost building these kind of restraints for the silk. I found the silk supplier through Sunny Dolat. He sort of shared a bunch of contacts with people, and Tosheka was the one that was willing to work with me and to create these patterns and these kind of complex textiles for me. A huge part of the exhibition is this installation that's made out of steel and bass resonators, which creates a sense of doom and ominousness to the space. And Tahir Karmali is building this speaker. I'm working with Jesse, who is flying in from Brooklyn, who will be helping me dye the textiles. And we are using a specific dye that we also kind of collaborated with an artist in the States that's made specifically out of decommissioned police guns and other American guns that have been dissolved and turned into a dye that we will be imbuing these silks with. The silk is the replacement for the body, and then the iron is the replacement for blood. So these two things, so the fiber is always the body. In all of my work, you'll see these kind of like, these fibrous like figures or things that are primarily in portrait scape. Climate degradation is going to cause some of the largest mass migrations that we're going to see in the world, and actually Kenya is facing climate and environmental migrants. And so a lot of the people that are living in Kakuma, Dadaab, Hargeisa, a lot of them are actually moving because of climate degradation and the expansion of the Sahara Desert. And the first piece that you're going to see are these screen prints of all of these refugee camps and migratory camps and all of these different spaces. As you move through the show, I want the audience to kind of explore it, but also the show is Spartan. There are 5 pieces in the entire show outside of the prints, right? So you really have to take time in looking at all of these details and to see like how labor intensive they are, but also how minimal they are as well. You know, all these silks took like a full year to completely weave and harvest and like get everything to be done. And then also thinking about all the brass pieces, all of the metal pieces, the sound work as well. This show also touches on this kind of tension that we have between, you know, especially looking at Nairobi with this extreme development, and then we have these other extremes. So there are these 2 extremes that you're seeing. So you're going to see the corrugated iron, the concrete, and these beautiful brass pieces, these metal pieces, this vibrating sense. So you have this kind of feeling of tension between, you know, the softness, the vulnerability of the silk, and then it being held by these things that we typically associate with construction and development. I'm really excited to show this series of work for this exhibition because it is a chance for people to see who I am personally and who I've become and what the work that I can make looks like and what work could be for myself. And I'm really excited to actually have an opening where everyone who I've known for so long can actually see a complete collection of work that is not just piecemeal things that I've sent from New York. And I really like the fact that with this work, it's very personal for me to my relationship to Kenya and what's happening here and what's happening for me and myself. And then when you go to the Armory show, which is literally opening the week after, it is a bit about Kenya and it's also a bit about America, and specifically using this gun, decommissioned police gun dye as well. onto the silks, and then moving on to to 154 in London, which would be sort of an amalgamation of the two. I think what's really interesting about this show is that there are so many different layers to each of the pieces that you can walk through this thing and experience it in a very minimal way. But if you decide to pay attention and look at all the little details, to look at all of the pattern work that is done into the silk and the cotton, and to look at all of these kind of minutiae and these little pieces, it's more of a treasure hunt. And so if I tell you the full story now, you know, you won't have as much fun kind of going through all of these little bits and pieces.